name is Pastor Alex Agyapong. It's a pleasure for me to be with you today. For the past few years, I have been looking at this subject, small beginnings. And today, it is my pleasure to take you through a few principles and few ideas that can enable you start from the bottom to the top. The Bible says in Job chapter 8, verse 7, that though your beginning was small, yet your latter end would increase abundantly. Now, this statement is in the book of Job, even though it was not uttered, it was not spoken by Job. It actually was a kind of encouragement from one of Job's friends by name Bildad, when Job had gone through so many challenges, his body from the crown of his head to the sole of his feet being infested with painful boils and all that, and some of his friends visited him, and one of them by name Bildad made that important statement, which is very familiar to many of us, that though your beginning was small, yet your latter end would increase abundantly. You can also apply this principle into your life, that though your beginning was small, yet your latter end would increase abundantly. Let me begin with this interesting illustration. It's a few years ago, I had a privilege of joining members of our church. It was the youth church, and we went to visit Boti Waterfalls. It's one of the most amazing sites, a major tourist destination in Ghana, and we were there to see one of these nature wonders, the aesthetic outlook of nature. Now, the tour guide began to tell us the story, the history. It was actually a legend about the Boti Waterfalls. And this is what he said. He said, this spectacular waterfall, as you see today, started as tiny drops of water that drizzled down from the top of this mountain. At first, it looked small, insignificant, and today look at how magnificent and spectacular it has become today, drawing people from every corner of the world. Quite amazing. He told us that the Boti Waterfalls had a beginning, and when it started, it couldn't attract anyone because it was insignificant. It was a tiny drop of water. It couldn't attract anyone, but today it is attracting people from many corners of the world. And as we were journeying back home, I began to reflect upon what the tour guide told us. That is the legend he shared with us, how the Boti Waterfalls started. That it started as tiny drops of water that drizzled down from the top of that mountain. But today it is attracting so many people. So deep contemplation settled upon me, and I began to reflect upon it, and also wrote down these principles, that we are all like the Boti Waterfalls. Because number one, it doesn't really matter how we start in life. What matters is how we are going to finish. It doesn't really matter how you started in life. It doesn't really matter how you began. What matters is how you are going to finish. Secondly, the end of a thing is always better, always glorious than its beginning. The end of a thing, your latter end is always glorious and always better than its beginning, than your beginning. Thirdly, without a small beginning, there wouldn't be a big end. Fourthly, the small beginnings and little efforts will certainly prepare the way for the big ends. That is why it is important that you appreciate your small beginnings, because though your beginning was small, your latter end would increase abundantly. Fifthly, you can start life with little, but you can end with much. Sixthly, you should never despise or look down upon your small beginning. This is very important. You must never despise or look down upon your small beginning. Why? Every great accomplishment is a series of little beginnings. Every great accomplishment is a series of little beginnings. As a matter of fact, there are so many people the world over who have achieved tremendous success, who began as nobodies, As a matter of fact, when they began, nobody knew them. But today, they have become celebrities, and today we are according them that due dignity and respect. But we don't know how they started. We don't know that they also had a small beginning. So you can be equated or can be likened to that Boti waterfall experience, that it began in little drops of water, and today it is attracting tourists from every corner of the world. You know, that statement that I made in the book of Job, that text, Job chapter 8, verse 7, did not come from Job, but rather it was a statement that was made by one of Job's friends by the name Bildad. We are all familiar with the story of Job, an amazing story. The story of Job is one of the most amazing stories recorded in the Bible. Job was fabulously rich initially, and he had a very great family, wonderful family experience, and he lived with his family in Ox. Now, within a single day, Job went through a crucible. In fact, he lost everything that he had worked for, or God had blessed him with. And his wife asked him to denounce God and die. Curse God and die. But the faith that Job had in God did not go down, even though he had gone through such a terrible experience. His body, we are told in the Bible, that from the crown of his head to the sole of his feet became infested with painful boils. And three of his friends heard of the tragedy that had befallen their friend, and they traveled to where Job was, and they met with him. For a whole week, they sat with him and did not speak a word. It was their custom, a way of mourning. Just sat with Job and just to console him, to mourn with him without speaking any word for a whole week. Now then, they began to tell Job to do a retrospection of his life, reflect upon his life, and then see if perhaps he had sinned against God. That to them was responsible for Job's tragedy. In other words, they equated the tragedy of Job to Job not doing what was right in the eyes of God. In other words, God was bringing punishment. God was punishing Job because of his sin. So in the course of the interaction that he had with his three friends, one of them by name Bildad said, Job, it is time for you to confess your sin. It is time for you to make it right again with God. And when you do that, though your beginning was small, yet your latter end would increase abundantly. We can say this was very prophetic, because if you look at the last chapters of the book of Job, you notice that when everything was clear, Job had to regain his lost glory. He regained his lost reputation, and God also restituted everything that he had originally gave him. In other words, the Bible even declared that God blessed him twice as much as before. Quite amazing. The things that he originally lost at the end of his life, God restituted those things. He restored those things back to Job, confirming that statement that Bildad made, that though your beginning was small, yet your latter end would increase abundantly. Now, there are quite a number of personalities we find in the Bible and even in our contemporary world who also started as nobodies, but God lifted them up into apogee levels. There are so many of them who had insignificant starts. They had small beginnings, but God brought them up into higher levels. Though your beginning was small, your latter end would increase abundantly.